Yoga Warriors, Mickey Space here, guiding you today through a Yin practice. And our Yin practice today is focused on our hips. Now, if you'd like to play some music along with this session, in the comments below, there's a link to a mix that would work well with this session. So feel free to play that now. Otherwise, just follow me. So we're going to work a little hip sequence. This is a sequence I like to work with quite regularly. Three main postures that work on getting deep into the hips. So good to have a bolster, a couple of blocks and a blanket handy as always for Yin. Remember, if you don't have this equipment at home, for a bolster, a couple of pillows put together, always they can make a nice bolster, and even just to have pillows, cushions, anything really that's going to support us. For blocks, again, could just be cushions or maybe a thick book. Blankets, should have a blanket somewhere. So let's begin. We start with a square pose. So square pose is our first pose. So we're going to sequence through these three postures. So we do one side first, and then have a little rest, and then do the other side. So beginning, stretching out the legs. Now if you're quite tight in the hips or in the back, and you feel you're sort of falling back a bit, when you're trying to sit up with the legs extended, then maybe sitting up a little high, you could have your folded blanket or your cushion underneath the bottom, and just to give yourself a little hip lift to tilt the hips forward or tilt the pelvis forwards. I'm going to mirror you here. You're going to take your right ankle under the left knee first, and then fold the left leg in front of the right. Now, keeping that right ankle under the knee, there's a tendency to want to slide it back. Keep it under the knee like such. So you're not in your average sitting cross-legged position. You're creating like a square shape with the legs. So once you're there, check in. Now, depending on the external rotation that you have in your hips, so some of us might be quite high with the knees, so we would just stay there. I'm reasonably high. Some of you may be higher, and some might be lower. So if you're reasonably low, another option is to bring that left foot over the right knee and sit in that position there. For me, that's quite strong. I could do it for a little while, but I prefer just to have the foot in front. And then from here, now always making sure that the knees feel okay. If there's any pain in the knees, then we need to adjust, don't force. So you might adjust just by shifting the position slightly or even flexing the feet. But ultimately, once you've found a place that feels okay, we bow forwards, bring the hands out in front, and that's where we're going to stay for a little while. So for some of us, just hanging like that, we should feel the stretch in the glutes in particular, the outer edges of the hips, and you may feel it running along into the thigh itself. Some of us might feel it on the inside of the thighs, a little through the adductors, maybe into the hip joints itself. But generally speaking, the glutes get the best workout here. And you play around with your edge. How far could you go in this position? But if that's too strong, then just step back a little bit. Really just looking for that sweet spot where we can stay for a little while, where we can breathe into the pose and relax as best you can. Now you might find that having a little support out in front could be nice. So you could bring your bolster out in front to rest on, or your pillows or cushions. And you could just use it like that as a place to rest, maybe the other way, like such. Well, some people like the bolster between the thigh and the chest, the thighs and the chest. And whichever place you come to, the idea is to stay for a while, as all yin postures, one of the main energies of yin, is giving ourselves a reasonable amount of time in the pose. It's one of our key principles of yin. Time, the long time, the long holds, giving ourselves a reasonable amount of time, allows us to go deeper into the experience, and particularly as we're targeting connective tissue. And connective tissue encompasses quite a lot of the body's mass, but let's talk about the connective tissue that wraps around the muscles. So it connects the muscles to each other and to the bones, and that's the area which often stiffens and gets quite tight. It's the tougher part of the muscle. It needs to be because of that connective aspect, but also because of that toughness, it does get pretty stiff as well. So a lot of the aches and pains we feel in the body is often that stiffness in the connective tissue. So the long holds allow for a deeper experience into that connective tissue. The connective tissue requires those longer holds to be able to ultimately relax somehow, to release the tension. Connective tissue doesn't relax easily, needs safety, a sense of safety, sense of ease. So we need to be able to hold the pose for a while when the connective tissue, after some time, finally feels that it's okay maybe to relax and be stimulated effectively, so that ultimately some of the tension it holds begins to soften. So a good 5 minutes or so in each pose is usually a good amount of time. It can be longer, can be a little shorter. But we've been there already for a good 5 minutes. So what we'll do is we'll come out of there, we'll transition though to the next pose. So we'll, from your square pose, we'll swing the left leg around now and bring it behind us to come into the swan pose from there. So the swan pose, some of us call it the pigeon pose. In yin we call it the swan. Now with the swan pose, you're aiming to have the hips square here, so not leaning to either side, square to the ground. So the right knee is slightly wider, generally speaking, than the right hip, slightly further out. And the right foot just comes as far forward as it can comfortably, and that will depend on configuration again of hips and knees, generally speaking, how far you can externally rotate the right hip. So it's not a case of having to have it perpendicular to the thigh, the lower leg. For a lot of us that would be agony, or would even break my knee probably, to try and stay there. So bringing the foot back, just finding the angle that feels okay for you. It's good to start with a little arch in the back, a little proud swan, activating the back muscles, a little yang in our yin there. And tuning into how that's feeling. For some of us, maybe a little support underneath the right buttock. So we could place a block or a folded blanket under there if you like, or your bolster or cushion, whatever you've got. And once you're comfortable, we come forwards And we take some time to rest in a sleeping swan. So you might bring the head to the back of the hands, maybe on a block. Or you could have the bolster again out in front to rest the body on. Again, just making sure the knees feel okay. The knees, in a lot of these hip postures, when there is tightness in the hips, the referral can go to the knees, and so we just need to make sure that we're never compromising our knees. So one of the key ideas in Yin, let's say the only real rule, because the postures are variable depending on your body, its shape, its size, its stiffness, its tightness. The posture can vary quite significantly from person to person. But the main thing to look for is any pain. If there are any sharp pains, and particularly in the joints, then no good. We need to either adjust or come out. If you're okay in the pose, then we can stay. We can hang out for some time again. Make it as comfortable as we can. Breathe nice and deeply. And then maybe even considering one of the other principles of Yin. Talked about time, giving ourselves time. Through that time we also create a sense of stillness. So it's stillness, working towards the idea of stillness. Ultimately, everything's always moving, vibrating on our physical plane, mental plane as well. But just finding that quiet space where everything slows right down. So we're somewhat still with the body. We're not moving, we're just slowly breathing. And the body just might oscillate slightly here or there, looking for that idea of stillness. And then reflecting that concept of stillness also in our minds. Again, the mind does fluctuate. There's always thoughts arising, coming and going. But using this practice also like a practice of meditation, to train the mind to slow down, the fluctuations of the mind. So acknowledging thoughts as they arise, like the body, there's always a little oscillation here and there, but without getting too involved in any thoughts. Encourage thoughts to dissolve. And maybe use your breath as your guide, as your anchor back into the stillness. So ultimately we find these little gaps between the thoughts, these moments of stillness. So again, we could stay there for a little while longer if we wanted to, but that's a good 5 minutes or so. So we'll come up and we'll transition to our third pose in this little series our shoelace pose. So release, if you've got a block or blanket or cushion, releasing it. Now bring the right buttock down. Of course, you can always come out. Usually in Yin we take a little rebound between each pose, but here we're working on a little transition. We're going to swing that left leg around and bring the left foot over to the other side of the right thigh, like such. So you're coming into that place which looks like initially what might be a place where you come into a classic spine twist. Could be nice even just to bring in a little twist for a moment. Good. And then going a little further into the shoelace, if we could, we bring that top foot, the left foot, further towards your right hip. So you may need to lift yourself up and kind of shuffle a little. Bring the knees as close together as you can. And so your feet are on the opposite sides. Your right foot towards the left hip and the left foot towards the right hip. Now, easier said than done for some of us. If it's proving to be challenging, maybe one option is to sit up a little high. That takes away some of that pressure that builds up in the hips. Or if it's too much, because it can be for some, it is quite a challenging pose for some of us, then just feel free to release the bottom leg. So extend the bottom leg and come into your half shoelace. In half shoelace, and then you'll feel it a lot more in the hamstrings, but that's also a good place to work with. So half shoelace or full shoelace. And then again, just holding the pose for a little while. The hands might be on the opposite foot. They might rest on the knee itself. We may bow forwards, hands to the ground. Maybe that bolster out in front with the arms resting there. If we can go a little further, maybe resting the forehead on a block. We could have the bolster between the thigh and the chest. Any other configuration that feels good for you. There's no right or wrong, as long as we're not feeling that pain, that sharp pain. If it's just a bit of a challenge within the muscles, within the connective tissue, then encourage you to work through that challenge. Always fine-tuning your awareness to something that's worthwhile working through, and then something that it's absolutely no, we need to come out because it's hurting, it's damaging. So always feel free to come out anytime you need to. But if you can, then stay with me a little longer. Working with that concept of time. That concept of stillness. And the other main principles of Yin is working towards an edge, exploring our edge in the pose. So when we're bowing forwards, generally that increases the stretch there in the glutes, also getting a stretch through the lower back. And how far forward can you go though? What's your ultimate position? And is that ultimate position a place that you can rest comfortably at? If it's not, then don't force it. Just step back a little bit. Find an edge that's comfortable and somewhere where you're finding essentially a sweet spot where you can feel the pose, but it's not too strong. When you're really diving into the edge or trying to go beyond it, it can be a little too strong. And that tension that creates makes it harder then for the connective tissue to soften, to be stimulated effectively. So usually stepping back a little from the edge is ideal. You can find that spot where we can actually relax into the pose. Well done, and slowly coming up again. If you're doing it in your own time, you're welcome to stay a little longer. But we'll take a little break now, so we'll release the legs and a little rebounds where we essentially take a break and then we'll come onto our backs and just pause just for a minute or so. So that works quite strong on the hips, so we're just pausing to acknowledge the work we've done so far, to be able to relax the connective tissue that we've been stimulating, stretching. To breathe nice and deeply and acknowledge how you feel after our initial work there. Breathing deeply into the hips. Letting go and giving in. So we can always stay in our rebound for a little longer, but if you stay too long, it becomes a shavasana, which can be nice, but we've got the other side to do still, so let's bring ourselves back up and work that same sequence again, now on the other side. So now, legs extended for the square pose. We'll take the right ankle under the left knee and fold the left leg in front of the right. Actually, it's the other way around, isn't it? Apologies. Left ankle under the right knee and right leg folded in front of the left. That's the opposite to what we did before. So we sit up tall. Maybe sitting up high if you feel you need that. And then exploring our pose, walking forwards with the hands, using any support that feels good. And essentially just coming into that place where we can rest, where we can breathe, where we can surrender as best we can in the pose. Slow and deep breaths. Give ourselves the time, exploring the edge and looking for that sense of stillness in the pose. Exploring the edge in particular, after some time in the pose, you may find that the edge does shift. So you may feel after a couple of minutes that, well, actually I could maybe just edge a little further into the pose, if it feels okay. Doesn't feel right, then don't. can always bring the awareness into the body, fine-tuning the awareness of how the muscles are feeling in the pose, where we're feeling it, our primary area, usually the hips, maybe the glutes, but the lower back for me is stretching as well, so feeling that stretch there as well. Good work, so slowly bringing ourselves back up and transitioning from there to the swan pose. So now our right leg, which is in front, ideally swinging behind us, and bringing it back and just adjusting to find that position. So the left knee out to the side. My left knee can be a little sore, so I do need to make sure I've got a good angle, not necessarily a right angle, just that it feels right for me. And I'm quite tight on that side, so I'll give myself a little extra support underneath the button. Maybe arching the back first. And then coming forwards to again rest for some time. In the pose of the swan. Breathing into the hips. Diving into the experience of the pose. Ultimately, that's where I want to rest my attention, in the here and now. So steering away from anything that's not relevant to this moment. But within this moment, of course, thoughts and emotions might arise. So just being mindful and respectful of those thoughts, of those emotions. And from that Chinese medicine perspective, which is also very much an aspect of Yin, just acknowledging, knowing that emotions are also tied into the body. And from that TCM perspective, we're working with each posture, we're working a number of meridians or energy lines, energy channels. Often there's a targeted meridian or two within these postures, and those meridians themselves have an emotional counterpart. So in these hip stretches that we're working, this one here in particular, there's a strong pressure into the gallbladder meridian. Gallbladder runs along the outside of the thigh. So on my left thigh there, working my gallbladder meridian. So into the glutes there, and down the thigh, all the way down the leg to the toe. And that's often associated with the emotion of indecisiveness. So it's talking about specifically where there's a blockage or stiffness or tightness within that meridian. Then these emotions are often associated with that blockage. So indecisiveness as an energy of the gallbladder meridian. So when that's really stiff and tight, it can bring up that energy. And also the liver meridian. Liver meridian runs on the inner thighs, on the inside. So that's along the inner left thigh there. I'm feeling that as well. Liver meridian is tied to the emotions of anger and frustration. And anger and frustration, energies that we often encounter, emotions that often come up for us. same as the indecisiveness. When we're stuck, when we can't quite move through a certain situation, certain decisions in our lives. So, and the anger and frustration that might come with that, or with any other situation, these are energies that arise often within us, and so working these postures can also in turn help to move through some of those emotional blockages that we may have. So feel free to consider where any of that resonates for you while you're in these postures. Coming back up, not that we need to go to look for anything, we just be mindful and encouraged to just acknowledge anything that does arise. So now we're going to transition to our final pose, our shoelace. We're going to lean over to the left side. The right leg comes over to the other side of your left thigh. And again, we're shuffling there, bringing the knees as close together, hands to the opposite foot. Remember, you can always sit a little higher if you need to, or we could extend the left leg, the bottom leg, into half shoelace if that's too strong for us. And then finding our way, our best position, just to hang out in the pose, hands maybe just to the opposite foot, staying upright could be plenty for us. Maybe the hands on the knee. Maybe the hands come down onto the ground and we bow further forwards to deepen that stretch, breathing into the hips. And encouraging that deeper immersion into the pose, into the experience of this support in any way that feels good. Aiming to fully surrender the last couple of minutes. Deepen the breath. Breathe into the resistance, into where you're feeling it. Invite that stillness, that spaciousness in the body, in the mind, in the heart. Stay a little longer if you like. And if you'd like to come out with me, gently releasing. Release the legs. Let's come for a rebound again onto our backs. Maybe with a blanket if you like. Get yourself nice and snug. It's a little mini shavasana as well, really. Coming to lie down there, closing the eyes. And allow the whole body to relax now. Tuning into the after effects of that work. Tuning into the rebound effect of the connective tissue, the muscles that we've been working. How do they feel afterwards? Those muscles that have been stretched, just feel maybe they're coming back into their shape, contracting slightly. It should be a nice sensation, having created that space within those muscles. Relax the whole body. Go completely. Free to stay there for a little longer in your shavasana, as long as you like. If you'd like to come out with me, give the fingers and toes a wriggle, stretch the arms over the head. Holding on to your side. And then coming up to sitting when you're ready. Sitting tall, shoulders back, spine upright. Circle the arms up, hands in prayer. To the heart. And taking a bow with respect and gratitude for each other. Namaste.